12 military K9 dogs sat trembling behind rusted steel cages. Scars marked their bodies. Medals still hung from their collars. They had saved American lives in Afghanistan and Iraq. Now they were being auctioned off like equipment. A Navy SEAL stepped through the crowd of contractors and buyers. His calloused hand gripped his 8-year-old daughter's palm. He scanned the cages one by one. Then he stopped. His eyes locked on the officer in charge. His voice came low and steady. "I will take all of them." The room went silent. No one knew what would happen next, not even him. Marcus Reed was 38 years old and had spent half his life in uniform. He had survived missions that most people would never hear about. He had lost friends in places whose names were still classified. He had learned to carry weight that had nothing to do with gear. 3 years ago, his wife died of cancer. Since then, he had been raising their daughter alone. Emma was 8 now. She had her mother's eyes and her mother's love for animals. Every morning before school, she helped Marcus feed Rex the German Shepherd, who had served alongside him in Iraq. Rex was retired now, but he still moved like a soldier. He slept by Emma's bed at night. He waited by the door when Marcus left for work. He was the steadiest thing in their house besides each other. Marcus had transitioned out of active combat after his wife's death. He trained younger SEALs now. He taught them how to survive, how to think, how to stay human when the world tried to strip that away. He did not talk much. He never had. But when he spoke, people listened. His code was simple. Loyalty never expires. Not to your country, not to your team, not to the ones who cannot speak for themselves. One Thursday morning, Marcus checked his email and saw a message from the Department of Defense. The subject line read, "K9 Retirement Auction, Fort Bragg." He almost deleted it. Then he saw a name on the attached list. Shadow. He sat up straighter. Shadow had been Jake Morrison's dog. Jake had been Marcus's best friend since basic training. 2 years ago, Jake was killed in Syria during a raid that went wrong. Shadow had been with him when it happened. Marcus had tried to adopt Shadow after Jake's death. He had filled out the paperwork. He had waited for approval. Then the messages stopped coming. No one returned his calls. Eventually, he assumed Shadow had been reassigned or placed somewhere safe. Now he was seeing Shadow's name on an auction list like he was surplus equipment. Emma came into the kitchen with her backpack already on. She saw the look on her father's face and stopped. "What's wrong, Daddy?" Marcus turned the laptop toward her. "You know how I told you about Uncle Jake's dog?" Emma nodded. She had seen photos. Jake had visited their house twice before he deployed. Shadow had been with him both times. Emma had drawn a picture of Shadow wearing a medal. It was still pinned to the fridge. "He's at Fort Bragg," Marcus said quietly. "They're selling him." Emma's face changed. "Selling him? Like Rex?" "Not like Rex," Marcus replied. "Rex came home because I fought for him. Shadow should have come home too." Emma set her backpack down and walked over to her father. She put her small hand on his arm. "Can we go see him?" Marcus looked at his daughter. She had already lost her mother. She had learned too young what it meant to lose people you loved. But she had also learned something else from her mother. She had learned not to look away when something was wrong. "Yeah," Marcus said. "We can go see him." That Saturday, Marcus drove Emma to Fort Bragg. The facility was 2 hours away. Emma brought a book but did not read it. She stared out the window and asked questions Marcus did not always know how to answer. Why would they sell a hero? Where do the dogs go if no one buys them? What happens to the ones who are too old? Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter. He did not have good answers. He had been asking himself the same things since he saw that email. When they arrived, the building did not look like a rehabilitation center. It looked like a warehouse. Cold, industrial. The kind of place where things were stored, not cared for. There were no signs welcoming visitors. No flowers. No photos of the dogs who had served. just a metal door with a buzzer and a clipboard hanging beside it. Marcus signed in. A young private escorted them through a narrow hallway that smelled like disinfectant and wet concrete. At the end of the hall was a large room filled with steel cages stacked 2 high. Inside each cage was a dog. Emma's grip on Marcus's hand tightened. She did not say anything, but he felt her whole body tense. The dogs were older. Most of them were between 6 and 9 years old. They had scars. Some were missing part of an ear or a piece of their tail. Their coats were clean, but their eyes were dull. They sat quietly in their cages, not barking, not moving much. They looked like soldiers waiting for orders that would never come. A man in uniform approached them. His name tag read, Captain Lawrence. He was in his 50s, with gray hair, and a voice that sounded like he had said the same things 1,000 times before. "You here for the auction?" Lawrence asked without looking up from his tablet. "I'm here about Shadow," Marcus said, Jake Morrison's dog. Lawrence scrolled through his screen. "Morrison. Yeah, he's flagged for sale. Behavioral issues." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Behavioral issues. He saved 6 soldiers before Jake was killed. Lawrence finally looked up. His expression did not change. "That's not in the file." "Then the file's wrong." Lawrence shrugged. "These are assets being decommissioned, not pets. If you want a bid, registration starts at 1000 hours. Emma tugged on Marcus's sleeve. Her voice came out small and confused. "Daddy? Why are they in cages? Rex never stays in a cage." Captain Lawrence glanced at her, then back at Marcus. "We're not set up for open housing. This is a holding facility." Marcus crouched down next to Emma. "It's okay, sweetheart. Let's go look at them." They walked slowly down the rows of cages. Each one had a tag clipped to the front with a name and age and a service record. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. Some of the tags were worn and faded. The dogs inside barely reacted as people passed. A few lifted their heads. Most just stared. Emma stopped in front of one cage. Inside was a tan-colored dog with a scar across his shoulder. The tag read, "Veteran of Kandahar Province." Emma pressed her fingers against the steel mesh. The dog looked at her, but did not move. "He's scared," Emma whispered. Marcus knelt beside her. "Yeah, I think he is." They kept walking. Marcus scanned each cage, each name. He recognized 4 of them. Dogs he had worked with. Dogs he had trained alongside. Dogs who had saved lives. Now they were sitting in cages waiting to be auctioned off to private security firms or wealthy buyers who wanted a guard dog with a war record. Then he saw cage number 7. The tag read, "Shadow, Belgian Malinois, 9 years old, combat service in Syria, behavioral assessment, high risk, not suitable for adoption." Marcus stopped walking. His heart kicked hard against his ribs. Inside the cage, Shadow sat perfectly still. His coat was darker than Marcus remembered. His eyes were sharper. He was thinner, but he was alive. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Shadow's ears lifted. His head tilted slightly to the right. That was the gesture Jake had trained him to do when he recognized someone. It meant friend. Marcus stepped closer to the cage and crouched down. "Hey, buddy, do you remember me?" Shadow stood. He walked to the front of the cage and pressed his nose against the mesh. His tail did not wag, but his eyes stayed locked on Marcus's face. Emma knelt beside her father. "Is that him?" Marcus nodded. His throat felt tight. "Yeah, that's him." Shadow lifted one paw and placed it against the steel bars. It was another trained gesture. One Jake had used when he wanted Shadow to signal trust. Marcus reached out and pressed his hand flat against the cage where Shadow's paw rested. They stayed like that for several seconds. Then Marcus stood and turned toward Captain Lawrence, who was watching from across the room. Marcus's voice came out sharper than he intended. "Why is Shadow here? I filed adoption paperwork 2 years ago." Lawrence walked over and checked his tablet again. No record of that request. He's been flagged as high risk since he came back from Syria. High risk. Marcus's voice rose slightly. "He saved 6 men before my best friend died. How is that high risk?" Lawrence's expression stayed flat. "If it's not in the file, it didn't happen. That's policy." Marcus stared at him. He felt Emma's hand slip into his. He felt Shadow watching from behind the bars. He felt the weight of every dog in that room pressing down on his chest. He took a breath and looked around the facility. 12 cages, 12 dogs, all of them with scars, all of them with medals that no one seemed to care about anymore. All of them sitting in silence, waiting for someone to remember what they had done. Then a man in a suit approached. He was not military. He carried a leather folder and wore a badge that read, "Consultant." He extended his hand toward Marcus with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "David Harper," the man said smoothly. "I represent a private firm that specializes in repurposing military assets. Are you interested in any of these animals?" Marcus did not shake his hand. Repurposing. Harper opened his folder and pulled out a glossy brochure. It featured photos of armored vehicles, tactical gear, and dogs in vests with corporate logos. "We provide K9 services to private security firms, corporate clients, and international contracts. These dogs have valuable training. We make sure that training doesn't go to waste." Marcus looked down at the brochure. The prices listed were in the tens of thousands. This was not about care. This was business. Emma leaned closer to her father and whispered, "Daddy, they know you can help them." Marcus looked back at the cages. All 12 dogs were standing now. Not barking, not whining, just standing. Watching him. Waiting. He thought about Jake. He thought about the promise he had made. "If anything happens to me, take care of Shadow." He thought about every mission where a dog had saved a life. Every alert. Every warning. Every time a K9 had put itself between a soldier and danger. He turned back to Captain Lawrence. His voice was calm, but there was no room for argument in it. "I will take all of them." Lawrence blinked. "Excuse me." "All 12, Marcus said. "I'll take all 12 dogs." Harper stepped forward, still smiling. "Sir, these animals require specialized care. Facilities, veterinary oversight. It's not as simple as, 'I know what they require.'" Marcus cut him off. "I trained half of them." Captain Lawrence set his tablet down. His tone shifted slightly. Less bureaucratic, now more annoyed. "Mr. Reed, even if you could afford it, you'd need approval. Background checks, facility inspections. This isn't a pet store." Marcus met his eyes without flinching. "Then start the paperwork." Lawrence stared at him for a long moment. Then he picked up his tablet and walked toward his office without another word. Harper closed his folder slowly. "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be." Marcus did not respond. He turned back to the cages. Shadow was still watching him. So were the others. Emma squeezed his hand tighter. As they left the building that afternoon, Marcus knew one thing for certain. Something was being hidden. The sealed files, the behavioral flags that made no sense, the private consultants circling like vultures. This was not about retiring military dogs. This was about profit. And someone was making sure no one asked too many questions. Marcus opened the truck door for Emma. She climbed into her seat and buckled herself in. Then she looked up at her father with the same steady gaze her mother used to have. "Are we really going to save them?" "Daddy." Marcus closed the door gently. He walked around to the driver's side and got in. He started the engine but did not pull out of the parking lot right away. He sat there for a moment, staring at the building in his rearview mirror. Then he looked at his daughter. "Yeah, sweetheart. We are." He did not tell her what he was really thinking, that this was bigger than 12 dogs, that someone had decided these animals were worth more as commodities than as heroes, that Jake had died because of bad intel, and now Jake's dog was being sold like scrap metal. Marcus pulled out of the parking lot and headed home, but in his mind, the mission had already begun. The call came the next afternoon while Marcus was at the training facility. He saw Captain Lawrence's number on the screen and stepped outside to answer it. Lawrence's voice was clipped and formal. "Mr. Reed, after reviewing your application, we cannot approve your request." Marcus leaned against the wall. "Why not?" "Security concerns," Lawrence said. "And there's been a competing bid. Someone has offered to take all 12 animals at a higher price." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "I thought this was a public auction." "It is, but certain buyers have priority access. I'm sure you understand." Lawrence did not wait for a response. The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone. He had expected resistance, but not this fast. Someone wanted those dogs badly enough to shut him out before the process even started. That meant this was not about policy. It was about control. He scrolled through his contacts and found the number he was looking for. Helen Morrison, Jake's mother. He had not spoken to her in almost a year. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. "Marcus." Her voice was soft and tired. She sounded older than he remembered. "Hi, Helen. I'm sorry to call out of the blue like this." "It's all right," she said quietly. "Is everything okay?" Marcus took a breath. "I saw Shadow yesterday, at Fort Bragg. They're trying to sell him." There was a long silence on the other end. Then Helen's voice broke. "They told me he died 2 years ago, right after Jake. They said he was killed in the same attack." Marcus closed his eyes. His hand tightened around the phone. "He's alive, Helen, and I'm going to bring him home to you." Helen started to cry. It was the quiet kind of crying that came from too much grief stored up for too long. "Jake loved that dog," she said through the tears. "He loved him so much." "I know," Marcus said. "And Jake made me promise to take care of him if anything happened. I'm not going to break that promise." Helen took a shaky breath. "What do you need me to do?" "Just hold on," Marcus told her. "I'll get him back." After he hung up, Marcus sat in his truck for a few minutes. He thought about Jake, about the last time they had talked before the mission in Syria. Jake had been quieter than usual. He had joked less. He had looked at Shadow differently, like he knew something Marcus did not. Marcus pulled out his phone again and sent a text to someone he had not contacted in over a year. Sarah Dawson, former SEAL, now an investigative journalist who specialized in military contracting and corruption. If anyone could dig up dirt, it was Sarah. Her reply came back in under a minute. "Call me." Marcus dialed. Sarah picked up on the first ring. "Marcus Reed, I thought you went quiet." "I did," Marcus said, "but I need a favor." "I'm listening." Marcus told her everything. The auction, the sealed files, the private consultant, the competing bid that appeared out of nowhere. Sarah did not interrupt. She just listened the way she always had, like she was already building a case in her head. When he finished, Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Give me 48 hours. If there's dirt, I'll find it." "Thanks, Sarah." "Don't thank me yet," she replied. "If this is what I think it is, you're about to piss off some very connected people." "Good," Marcus said. 2 days later, Sarah sent him a file. It was over 100 pages long. Marcus opened it at his kitchen table after Emma had gone to bed. Rex lay at his feet watching him the way he always did when something was wrong. The first section detailed a private military contractor called Aegis K9 Solutions. The CEO was a man named Richard Hartley. Former Army. Dishonorable discharge in 2008 for financial misconduct. He had rebuilt himself in the private sector, providing security dogs to corporations, embassies, and foreign governments. Aegis had a contract with the Department of Defense worth $42 million. The terms were simple. Aegis would take possession of retired military K9s, assess their viability, and either place them in civilian roles or retire them humanely. In exchange, Aegis received the dogs for $5,000 each and sold them to clients for upwards of $50,000. The profit margin was staggering, but that was not the worst part. Sarah had uncovered internal documents showing that Aegis had been falsifying behavioral assessments. Dogs with clean service records were being flagged as aggressive or unstable. Their medical files were sealed to prevent handlers or family members from contesting the evaluations. Once flagged, the dogs were funneled into Aegis's private network and resold to the highest bidder. Marcus read through case after case. Over 100 dogs in the past 3 years. All of them disappeared into the same system. Most of them ended up overseas, working for private security firms, in places where regulations did not exist. Then Marcus reached the second section of the file. His hands went cold. Sarah had found mission reports from Syria, specifically the operation that killed Jake Morrison. The intelligence that led Jake's team into that valley had come from Aegis. They had been contracted to provide ground-level intel for a raid on a suspected weapons cache. The intel was wrong. There was no cache. There was an ambush. Jake and 2 other soldiers died. Shadow had been the only survivor on the ground until reinforcements arrived. Marcus read the after-action report 3 times. The language was vague. Faulty intelligence, communication breakdown, no fault assigned. But Sarah had attached a separate document, an internal Aegis email thread discussing cost-cutting measures for field operations. They had been using undertrained local assets to gather intel because it was cheaper than deploying their own people. Accuracy was secondary to budget. Marcus set the papers down. His hands were shaking. Jake had not died because of war. He had died because someone decided it was cheaper to cut corners. And now that same company wanted to erase Shadow because he was a witness to their negligence. Marcus stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the street was quiet. The neighborhood was asleep. Everything looked normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. He picked up his phone and called Sarah. She answered immediately. "You read it?" "Yeah," Marcus said. His voice was flat. "I read it." "I'm sorry, Marcus." "Don't be sorry," he replied. "Just tell me how we use this." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "If you go public with this, you're going to make a lot of enemies. Aegis has friends in Congress. They have lawyers. They'll bury you in paperwork and threats." "I don't care." "I know," Sarah said. "That's why I already sent copies to 3 news outlets and a Senate Oversight Committee." Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. Not relief. Not yet. But something close to it. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Sarah said. "Just finish this." The next morning, Marcus drove back to Fort Bragg. This time, he brought a lawyer. Tom Bradley was a veteran himself. He had served in the Marines before going to law school. He specialized in cases involving veteran rights and military misconduct. He was also one of the few people Marcus trusted completely. They walked into the facility together. Captain Lawrence was waiting for them in the main office. His expression was guarded. He did not offer to shake hands. "Mr. Reed," Lawrence said, "I wasn't expecting you back. I'm here to see the full medical and behavioral records for all 12 dogs," Marcus said. Lawrence crossed his arms. "That's classified information." Tom stepped forward. He placed a folder on the desk between them. "These animals are no longer in active service. Their records are subject to Freedom of Information Act requests. We're filing one today, and we're copying the DOD Inspector General." Lawrence's face went pale. He glanced at the folder, but did not touch it. "I don't have the authority to release those files." "Then find someone who does," Tom said calmly. "Because if we don't get access by the end of the week, we're going to assume you're obstructing a federal inquiry." Lawrence stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. You're making a mistake. Marcus met his eyes. No, someone else made the mistake. We're just fixing it. They left the office and walked back to the truck. Marcus's phone buzzed as they reached the parking lot. It was a text from an unknown number. Drop this. You don't want to make enemies. Marcus showed the message to Tom. The lawyer frowned. That's witness intimidation. Save that. Marcus typed a reply. Too late. I already have. He hit send and put the phone back in his pocket. 2 hours later, Marcus was at home when a black sedan pulled into his driveway. A man in an expensive suit stepped out. Marcus recognized him from the company logo on the brochure. Richard Hartley, CEO of Aegis K9 Solutions. Marcus met him at the front door. He did not invite him inside. Hartley smiled like they were old friends. Mr. Reed, I've heard a lot about you. I can't say the same, Marcus replied. Hartley's smile did not fade, but his eyes went cold. You're a decorated SEAL, a hero. Why waste all that on a few dogs? Those dogs are heroes too, Marcus said. More than you'll ever be. Hartley's expression shifted slightly. The smile stayed, but the warmth drained out of it completely. Be careful, Mr. Reed. You have a daughter. Emma, right, 8 years old. It would be a shame if she had to lose another parent. Marcus felt his entire body go rigid. His fists clenched at his sides. Every instinct he had trained for years told him to move, to act, to end the threat standing 3 feet away from him. But he forced himself to stay still. He took 1 step closer to Hartley. His voice dropped to just above a whisper. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Hartley's smile finally disappeared. He turned and walked back to his car without another word. Marcus watched him drive away. Then he pulled out his phone and called Tom Bradley. Add witness intimidation and threatening a minor to the complaint, Marcus said, and get it filed today. That night, Marcus sat on the couch with Emma curled up beside him. She was reading a book about dogs. Rex was asleep on the floor. The house was quiet, normal, safe. But Marcus could not stop thinking about what Hartley had said, about the threat, about how far these people were willing to go to protect their profits. Emma looked up from her book. Daddy, are you okay? Marcus forced himself to smile. Yes, sweetheart. I'm okay. Emma studied his face the way she always did, when she knew he was not telling her everything. Then she closed her book and leaned her head against his shoulder. Are you giving up? Marcus shook his head. No. Good, Emma said quietly. Because heroes don't give up. And Shadow is still waiting. Marcus wrapped his arm around her and pulled her close. He thought about Jake, about the promise he had made, about the words Jake had said to him before that last deployment. If I don't make it back, promise me you'll always do the right thing. Marcus had promised, and he was not going to break that promise now. He picked up his phone and opened the file Sarah had sent him. He scrolled through the documents again, the falsified reports, the financial records, the emails showing Aegis had a senator on their payroll, the proof that they had been running this scheme for 3 years. Then he opened a new message and typed Sarah's number. Send everything to every outlet you know. We're not waiting anymore. Sarah's reply came back immediately. Already done. It goes live tomorrow morning. Marcus set the phone down. He looked at Emma, who had fallen asleep against his shoulder. He looked at Rex, who was watching him with steady, patient eyes. He thought about Shadow and the 11 other dogs sitting in those cages, waiting for someone to fight for them. Marcus stood up carefully and carried Emma to her room. He tucked her in and kissed her forehead. Then he went back downstairs and sat at the kitchen table. He did not sleep. He just waited. Because he knew what came next. The fight was not over. It was just beginning. And this time, he was not going to stop until every lie was exposed and every dog was free. Jake had died believing Marcus would do the right thing. Shadow had survived to see that promise kept. And tomorrow, the whole world was going to know what Aegis K9 Solutions had been doing to the heroes who could not speak for themselves. By the next evening, Marcus knew he could not wait any longer. Sarah had called him that afternoon with urgent news. Aegis was moving the dogs. They had secured transport to relocate all 12 animals to a private facility in Texas within 72 hours. Once they were gone, there would be no legal way to track them. No way to prove what had happened. No way to bring them home. Marcus made the decision in less than a minute. He was going to get those dogs out tonight. He called Sarah first. She did not ask questions. She just said, "What do you need?" "Eyes on the perimeter," Marcus told her, "and a live feed ready to go." "I can do that," Sarah replied. "When what?" 2 in the morning. Sarah did not hesitate. "I'll be there." Next, Marcus called Tom Bradley. The lawyer was less enthusiastic. "Marcus, if you do this without authorization, they'll charge you with theft of government property. Maybe worse." "I know," Marcus said, "but if I don't do this, those dogs disappear forever, and Aegis gets away with everything." Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. "I'll have bail money ready, and a defense strategy. But Marcus, you better make this count." "I will." Marcus hung up and made 3 more calls. 3 men he had served with. Men who had known Jake. Men who understood what loyalty meant. All 3 of them said yes, without asking for details. At midnight, Marcus kissed Emma goodnight. She was already asleep. Her grandmother was staying over to watch her. Marcus did not tell her where he was going. He just kissed her forehead and whispered, "I love you, sweetheart." Rex followed him to the door. Marcus knelt down and scratched behind his ears. "You stay here and keep her safe, okay?" Rex looked at him with those steady, knowing eyes. Then he walked back to Emma's room and lay down outside her door. Marcus grabbed his jacket and walked out to the truck. The 3 men were already waiting in the driveway. Mike Jennings, Danny Cross, Liam Porter, all former SEALs, all people Marcus trusted with his life. They did not shake hands. They just nodded. Then they climbed into the van Mike had borrowed and headed toward Fort Bragg. The drive took 90 minutes. No one spoke much. They went over the plan twice. Simple. Direct. No weapons except tranquilizers in case something went wrong. They were not there to hurt anyone. They were there to take back what had been stolen. Sarah was already parked half a mile from the facility when they arrived. She had a laptop open on her dashboard and a camera mounted on a tripod in the passenger seat. She looked up as Marcus approached her window. "Security shift changes at 0200, Sarah said. "You'll have 12 minutes before the next patrol comes through. Maybe 15 if you're lucky." "We'll take 12, Marcus replied. Sarah handed him a small earpiece. "I'll be in your ear the whole time, and the feed goes live the second you're inside." Marcus nodded. He turned back to the others. They were already geared up. Dark clothes, gloves, flashlights. Mike had the tranquilizer gun strapped across his back. Danny carried bolt cutters. Liam had the medical kit in case any of the dogs were injured. At exactly 2 in the morning they moved. Marcus still had his old access card from when he had been active duty. It should have been deactivated years ago. But base security was always slow with updates. He swiped it at the side entrance. The light turned green. The lock clicked open. They slipped inside without a sound. The hallway was empty. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Marcus led the way toward the holding room where the cages were kept. His heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. He had done harder missions than this, but none of them had ever felt more personal. They reached the door to the holding room. Marcus tried the handle. Locked. Danny stepped forward with the bolt cutters and made quick work of the chain securing it. The door swung open. Inside, the 12 dogs were exactly where Marcus had last seen them. Most of them were lying down. A few lifted their heads as the men entered. None of them barked. It was like they knew. Marcus went straight to cage number 7. Shadow was awake. He stood as Marcus approached. Their eyes met. Marcus knelt down and unlocked the cage door. "Hey, buddy, we're going home." Shadow stepped out without hesitation. He pressed his body against Marcus's leg. Marcus ran his hand along Shadow's back. The dog was thinner than he should have been. His ribs were too visible. But he was alive. And he was coming home. The other men moved quickly through the room, opening cages one by one. The dogs stepped out quietly. No barking, no chaos. They moved like they had been trained, like they remembered what it meant to trust. One of the dogs was limping badly, a tan-colored shepherd with a scar across his shoulder. Marcus recognized him from the first visit. He crouched down and lifted the dog into his arms. The animal did not struggle. He just rested his head against Marcus's chest. Sarah's voice came through the earpiece. "You've got 10 minutes. Move." Marcus turned toward the door. "Let's go." But as they moved toward the exit, Liam stopped. "Marcus, look at this." He was standing in front of a filing cabinet in the corner of the room. The drawers were labeled by year. Liam had pulled one open. Inside were hundreds of files, each one marked with a dog's name and a red stamp that read, "Transferred." Marcus set the injured dog down gently and walked over. He pulled out a handful of files and flipped them open. Every single one had been flagged with false behavioral reports. Aggressive, unpredictable, high risk. None of it was true. It was all fabricated. Sarah's voice crackled in his ear again. "Marcus, what are you doing? You need to move." "Copy everything," Marcus said to Liam. "Take photos. We need proof." Liam pulled out his phone and started snapping pictures as fast as he could. Marcus grabbed another handful of files and did the same. They worked in silence for 90 seconds. Then Sarah's voice came through again, sharper this time. "Marcus, you're out of time. Security just radioed a patrol to check the holding area. You've got 2 minutes, maybe less." Marcus looked at the dogs. All 12 of them were standing near the door, waiting. He looked at the files still stacked in the cabinet. There were hundreds more, stories that would never be told. Dogs that would never come home. But he could not save them all tonight. He could only save these 12. "Let's move," Marcus said. They left the room and headed back down the hallway. The dogs followed without needing leashes. They moved in formation just like they had been trained. Shadow stayed close to Marcus. The injured dog limped along beside Danny, who had wrapped an arm around the animal's chest to help him walk. They were 20 feet from the exit when the alarm went off. The sound was deafening. Red lights flashed along the ceiling. Marcus heard boots pounding down the hallway behind them. He did not look back. He just kept moving. "Go, go, go." They burst through the side door and into the night. The van was 50 yards away. Sarah had already started the engine. The side door was open. Marcus sprinted toward it with Shadow at his side. The other dogs ran with them, their paws hitting the pavement in rhythm. Behind them, guards shouted. Flashlights swept across the parking lot. But Marcus did not stop. He reached the van and lifted the injured dog inside. The others jumped in after him. Mike, Danny, and Liam piled in last. Sarah hit the gas before the door was even closed. The van tore out of the parking lot. Sirens wailed behind them. But Sarah did not slow down. She took a hard left onto the main road and floored it. Marcus looked back through the rear window. 2 security vehicles were following them. But then, Sarah's voice came through the speakers, calm and steady. "They're not going to chase us." "Why not?" Mike asked. Sarah held up her phone. On the screen was a live video feed. It showed everything that had just happened. The locked cages, the falsified files, the 12 dogs being led to freedom. And it was streaming live to 10,000 viewers, then 20,000, then 50. "The whole internet is watching," Sarah said. "If they stop us now, they're admitting guilt." Sure enough, the security vehicles slowed down. Then they stopped. The sirens faded into the distance. Marcus sat back against the wall of the van. Shadow was pressed against his side. The injured dog was resting his head on Danny's lap. The others were scattered around the van, panting but calm. Mike looked at Marcus and shook his head. "You're insane." Marcus did not reply. He just closed his eyes and let himself breathe. 72 hours later, the story was everywhere. CNN, Fox News, BBC, The Washington Post. Every major outlet in the country was running the footage Sarah had streamed. A decorated Navy SEAL risks everything to save 12 retired war dogs. The headline wrote itself. Public outrage against Aegis K. 9 Solutions was immediate and overwhelming. The hashtag #SaveTheK9 Heroes trended worldwide. 15 million views in the first 24 hours, 30 million by the end of the week. The federal response was just as swift. NCIS and FBI agents raided Aegis headquarters in Virginia. They seized computers, files, financial records. Within 48 hours, CEO Richard Hartley was in custody. So were 2 Department of Defense officials who had taken bribes to approve Aegis contracts. Captain Lawrence was suspended pending investigation. He was later discharged from the military and charged with conspiracy to commit fraud. The investigation uncovered that Aegis had falsified reports for 127 dogs over 3 years. They had profited $8.3 million by reselling animals they had purchased from the government for a fraction of their market value. A senator who had been on Aegis's payroll resigned within the week. Richard Hartley was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. The 2 DoD officials received 8 years each. Captain Lawrence faced a court-martial and was dishonorably discharged. But for Marcus, the most important part came 2 days after the rescue. He drove to a small house in North Carolina, with Shadow sitting quietly in the passenger seat. Helen Morrison opened the door before he even knocked. She looked older than she had in the photos Jake used to show him. Her hair was gray now. Her face was lined with years of grief. But when she saw Shadow, everything about her changed. Shadow recognized her immediately. He pulled forward, and Marcus let go of the leash. The dog ran to Helen and pressed his body against her legs. She dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around him. She buried her face in his fur and sobbed. Marcus stood on the porch and watched. He did not say anything. There was nothing to say. After a few minutes, Helen looked up at him. Her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling. "You brought my boy back to me." Marcus knelt down beside her. "Jake made me promise. I'm sorry it took so long." Helen reached out and took his hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "You didn't just bring Shadow home. You brought Jake's honor back." Marcus stayed for an hour. He showed Helen how to care for Shadow. He gave her the contact information for a vet who specialized in retired military dogs. He promised to check in every week, and before he left, Helen hugged him tightly and whispered, "Thank you." The other 11 dogs were reunited with their handlers or their families within the month. Marcus worked with veteran organizations to track down everyone who had a connection to the animals. Each reunion was different. Some were quiet, some were loud and full of tears, but every single one of them mattered. The shepherd with the limp went back to the medic who had treated him in Afghanistan. The scarred Malinois went to a family with an autistic son and became a therapy dog. 2 of the dogs stayed with Marcus. They joined Rex in the backyard and became part of Emma's world. 6 months later, Marcus stood in an open field surrounded by trees. Behind him was a newly built facility with a sign that read, Morrison K9 Sanctuary. It was named after Jake. The motto was carved into a wooden plaque by the entrance. They saved us. Now we save them. The sanctuary provided rehabilitation for retired military dogs and therapy programs for veterans struggling with PTSD. The model was simple. Veterans came to volunteer. They cared for the dogs. They trained them, they healed them, and in the process, they healed themselves. 83% of veterans who participated reported reduced symptoms. The program worked because it gave both sides something to fight for. Emma was 9 now. She spent every weekend at the sanctuary. She had learned how to train dogs. She had learned how to read their body language. She had learned what her father had always known. That loyalty was not something you outgrew. It was something you honored. A new law had been passed in Congress, the K9 Heroes Act. It required the military to notify handlers when their dogs were retired. It gave handlers and their families priority for adoption. It made the evaluation process transparent. Marcus and Sarah had lobbied for it together, and when it passed, they stood in the gallery and watched the vote. Jake's name was mentioned 3 times during the debate. On this particular afternoon, Marcus stood in the middle of the sanctuary and watched as dogs played in the yard. The sanctuary had grown since those first 12. More dogs had been rescued, some donated by families who could no longer care for them. Others transferred from shelters and military facilities that had heard about the program. 27 dogs now called this place home. 15 veterans were scattered around the property, some throwing balls, some sitting quietly with a dog at their side. Rex and Shadow ran toward Marcus together. Emma was laughing as she chased after them. Marcus knelt down as the dogs reached him. He scratched behind their ears and smiled. Emma ran up and threw her arms around his neck. "Daddy, you did it. You kept your promise." Marcus pulled her close. "We did it together, sweetheart." Jake would be proud. He looked out across the field. The sun was setting behind the trees. The sky was golden and wide. And for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt like he had done something that mattered. Not because it was easy, not because it was safe, but because it was right. Because loyalty never retires. And heroes do not only walk on 2 legs. Closing 148 words. People ask me, was it worth it? Risking everything for 12 dogs, I tell them they are not just dogs. They are soldiers who took bullets meant for us. They are heroes who never asked for medals. They are brothers who never broke their loyalty. Jake died believing I would do the right thing. Shadow lived to see that promise kept. And now, every day, I watch warriors heal warriors. Humans and dogs, side by side, fighting a different kind of battle. Because loyalty never retires. And heroes do not only walk on 2 legs. Morrison K9 Sanctuary has since rescued 200 military dogs. 150 veterans have found healing through the program. The K9 Heroes Act has protected thousands of retiring war dogs. Richard Hartley was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Shadow lived 5 more happy years with Helen Morrison.